Hey, I'm Jamey from Spire Games, and today I'm going to talk about my favorite mechanism in Slay the Spire, the board game. I'm just going to film this on my normal camera here instead of on StreamYard because my internet is acting a little bit wobbly. I just tried to film this video on StreamYard and I can't really tell if it actually recorded anything. So, I'm not going to have any visuals for you today, but it's very easy to look up what Slay the Spire looks like. It's also very easy to look on Board Game Geek what Slay the Spire, the board game, looks like. They look very similar. I have loved the digital game for quite some time now, and I had the opportunity to play a friend's Kickstarter copy, newly arrived, of the cooperative version, tabletop version, of this amazing digital game, and I had a lot of fun with it. I had even more fun than I expected because I knew that I liked the game from the digital version, but I wasn't sure if I would enjoy the cooperative version of it because I like the solo version so well in digital format. But the cooperation I thought worked out really, really well in the game. There are up to 4 characters, so up to 4 players can play this game, and you're playing through multiple acts. We played through 1 act for 3 players in around 2.5 hours, so it was a good breaking point at that point to feel like we had played a complete game. You can go on and play a second and third act if you want to keep on going. And you can also pack up the contents or save the contents and continue at a later time if you want. But the cooperation between the decks I thought played a big role in it. We were each crafting our own decks, but every time we made the decision in those decks, whether we're adding cards, upgrading cards, buying cards or buying spells, potions, things that we could add to our deck, we were constantly in communication with each other about what's good. What's not only good for my deck, but what's also good for all of us at this time. If I'm going after a more defensive deck, are you going more offensive? What abilities are you playing off of that might benefit me or complement what's in my deck? So there's a lot of cooperative communication. It's also a simultaneous cooperative game. So whenever you have a combat encounter, you are working simultaneously with all other players to take down all of the monsters that are on the board. So it always felt like it was everyone's turn at all times, which requires a lot of communication. And the game, I think, fosters that really well. So it really did thrive in the cooperative format. A few things that I really appreciate about the game. Let me start out with my favorite mechanism. My favorite mechanism, because I think it's so clever, is the use of a single D6 die, numbered 1 through 6. Just a standard D6 die. It does so much in this game when they could have used a dozen dice and it would have been over the top, but instead they chose to use 1 die, and it does this really, really well. So basically there are a bunch of cards in the game. I'm looking at an image on my other screen. Unfortunately, I'm not showing it to you, but there are many enemy cards in the game that have numbers 1 through 6 on them with different impacts based on those numbers. So when it's the enemy's turn, based on the die roll, something might happen based on what's on that card. There are also card abilities that trigger if you roll a certain number. I think so those are cards that are outside your deck. I think there are also cards in your deck that trigger when a certain number is rolled. But here's the key. The die is only rolled once per round of the game. And there's only 1 die. And so you roll the die, and it impacts everything. Everything that has the numbers of the dice on it. Every card in the game that has numbers on it only looks at that 1 die result. And this is, I think, I want to highlight how clever this is, because I think a lot of designers, including myself, would have had 1 die for every single card in the game that had a connection to the die in the game. You would have rolled 1 die for every card, put that die on the card, and it would have meant something. But it's so much cleaner and more streamlined, and gave the designers some interesting control over the numbers that they chose to just have a single die. This turn, we rolled a 3. That impacts everything that cares about this number. This round, we rolled a 5, and so on. And it really gives all players an investment in that 1 single die. If you have a really powerful monster out that you don't want to roll a 1 on that monster, everyone sees that happen. And at the same time, you might have a card where you really want to roll a 1, or you don't want to roll a 1, or you have a player who's built their whole tableau around the number 5. And so it feels really good when that one person, when anyone, it doesn't matter who does that, rolls that 1 die for that round. Really, really clever game design there. That I think I definitely would have overlooked if I was designing this game. A couple other things that I wanted to mention about the game. One, it just implements the digital game in some really clever ways. I mentioned the cooperation. It's also how you upgrade cards. Every card has a front side and a back side. The back side has either a lower cost or a better benefit, or both. Whenever you upgrade that card, you just pull it out of the sleeve, you flip it over, and you put it back in the sleeve, and you have the upgraded side there in front of you. There's that. There's each character in the game has a huge deck of cards that they're pulling from at the end of each encounter. Most encounters end with you drawing 3 cards from that deck, from your unique character's deck, and picking one of them and adding it permanently to your deck. It felt abundant. that my character had so many cards for me to potentially see and potentially choose from. And that deck was unique to my character. Every other character in the game had their own unique giant deck of cards to discover and potentially add to their deck throughout the game. That felt really good. And also, importantly, in the digital game, there's some pretty high numbers that you deal with in the game. You have 60 or 70 health per character. The enemies that you're trying to defeat have 20 to 80 health. This game reduces those numbers, reduces the math, it reduces the addition down to around 10 health per character, around 1 to 10 health per card that you're encountering. It's only the bosses that have really big numbers, but it works out fine then. They have a different track that you're using to count health on bosses. So I thought that was a really clever idea to reduce the numbers, reduce that math down to what we can make for a more friendly experience on the tabletop. Anyway, there's a lot to love about Slay the Spire, the board game. I'm really impressed with this translation from digital to tabletop game. And my favorite mechanism is definitely the D6, but I love all these other things I mentioned as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Slay the Spire, the board game, if you've played it, or if you know the digital game, the things that you were looking forward to seeing in this cooperative version of the game. Or if you can think of other digital games that translated well to tabletop versions, I'd love to hear about them in the comments as well. Thanks.